Hi, I'm Femi Oke, and you're in the stream. Today, is the United States deporting Salvadorians to their deaths? We'll discuss a new Human Rights Watch report highlighting violence and abuse many face following deportation. You can share your thoughts on this issue. Tweet us at AJStream or leave a comment in our live YouTube chat. We are curating it right now as I speak, and you too, could be in the stream.
Hi, I'm Bridget Cambria. I'm an attorney with Aldea, the People's Justice Center. We want to end family detention and end family separation, and you're in the stream.
The US government's hardening immigration policy is putting thousands of deported Salvadorians at risk of death or abuse. That's according to the New York-based Human Rights Watch. For many deportees, readjusting to life in El Salvador is a struggle, particularly for those returning to a country they have had a very little connection with since birth. And it can be that lack of connection that puts them in harm's way. Human Rights Watch identified more than 200 cases of violence aimed at deportees. 138 of those were killed. Joining us to discuss this in San Francisco, California, Alison Parker. She's the Managing Director of Human Rights Watch US program. She also co-authored the new report on the plight of Salvadorian deportees. In San Salvador, El Salvador, Pastor Will Gomez. He runs a shelter that helps deportees and those fleeing gang violence. Also in San Salvador, Oscar. He was deported from the United States in 2017. We are not using his last name for protection reasons. Good to have you here, everybody, and have you in the conversation. Alison, I'm just looking at the tweet that you shared about the new Human Rights Watch report, and you talked about the number of cases of people who are in danger, who were deported, and then it goes on. More than 70 others were beaten, sexually assaulted, extorted, or tortured. This is horrific. How is this happening, Alison?
Well, it's happening because El Salvador is a country struggling with a major security and human rights problem. But deportees in particular are at severe risk. As you said in your opening, people who have lived a long time in the United States are at heightened risk, sometimes for extortion at the hands of gangs. But our report also highlights the cases of people who have fled domestic violence or sexual violence and are being deported right back into the hands of those same abusers.
There's so many different kinds of situations that lead people to be from the US and then taken to El Salvador. Do you cover all of those different situations in the report?
We do, and you're right. I mean, there are Salvadorans living in the United States with a variety of legal statuses. Two that are really relevant right now because they affect some 220,000 Salvadorans are temporary protected status and DACA, which is for people who arrived in the United States as children. The Trump administration has said they want to end both of those. So that's some 220,000 people who could be at risk of return. But the others are people who have fled abuse in El Salvador, tried to come to the U.S. and claim asylum. We've seen the Trump administration is really trying to eviscerate the right to seek asylum. And those people are being returned, in some cases, right back into the hands of their persecutors.
I want to introduce you to a young man called Dylan. He was in a witness documentary that we showed on Jazeera called El Salvador, Deportees Welcome. I want you to look to see what he has in his hand. It is just a solo plastic bag. This is his experience of ending up in El Salvador after being deported from the United States. Have a look.
My name is Dylan. I'm only 18. I never was expecting to arrive down here, you know. I don't got no memories of being here when I was young.
Oscar, I'm looking at Dylan there. He's got a single white plastic bag. The last time he was in El Salvador was when he was 5. You can relate to that because when you were deported, the last time you'd been in El Salvador, I think you were a toddler. You were 2 years old, right?
Yes, it was. And by me seeing that, it just brought back so many memories of when I landed here at 42 years old after leaving El Salvador when I was 2 years old. And it just brought back memories that it's terrifying coming over here because it's a country we do not know. And as soon as you come, by having facial tattoos, gang-related tattoos, the police are already looking at me as a target. You know, they're already looking at me as I'm a person that's going to come and do violence. They don't take a chance to get to know me or to give me some kind of help. Like, look, you know, do you have somewhere to go? You know, we got these programs for you. Have you changed? Do you want to change? The assumption that the government of El Salvador makes, you automatically, I mean, like trash. You know, you come here to do nothing but bad things. And it's not the truth. You know, they should take the time to get to know us and where we stand at that point in time. You know, and I'm thankful for Footsteps of Hope that they found me, because if it wasn't for them, the truth, I don't know where I would be, either in jail or already dead, because all my family's in the States. And it's very terrifying, that situation. By me seeing Dylan,
it all came back to you.
Back memories. Yes, it did. Just your little bag. That's your life.
That's it. How do you end up being deported and you have a bag? How is that possible? What happens?
Because you in prison over there before you get deported, and that's the only things you have right there. You know, you don't want whatever you had there in that little bag. That's what you had over there.
Right.
So that's what you're coming with.
Will, you also experienced deportation, and you changed that experience into helping other people. What do you remember about being taken back to El Salvador? What happened to you?
Well, it was a horrifying experience. Me taken to the U.S. when I was 11, and then growing up there in the States, you know, going to elementary, high school, junior high, and then out of nowhere, you know, they tell you that they're going to deport you. It's very shocking. I feel that it was unfair, you know, the fact that I grew up most of my life in the States, and out of nowhere, they just take away your residency, your legal status, and they tell you that you cannot be there anymore. So from one day to the next, just being on the plane, you know, seeing the difference between the city life to a bunch of mountains and horses and cows is very shocking, you know, so it was just crazy.
What is that animal? That's scary. I hear you laughing, but it's sort of rueful laughter. Something as simple as speaking Spanish, right? Because Oscar, you speak Spanish. Will, you speak Spanish, but in El Salvador, why is it different?
It's a different accent, you know.
Yeah.
Mexican Spanish or Spain Spanish, it's two different Spanish. I guess just the accent and the definition of the words is different, I guess.
Let me just go back to Alison. Alison, here, I'm just looking at a little clip, a little excerpt from this human rights report. And you are saying that people are being deported back to not just difficulties because they don't know a country, but to danger. So here we have a story about 3 children, including Oscar. This is another Oscar who interviewed. Oscar was 15 years old. Jacinto was shot dead in public just 2 weeks after the interview. The family believes gang members to be responsible for the killing. Oscar now moves between houses in hiding. Okay. What are those very tangible dangers that you feel people are being left to experience by themselves?
Yeah, I'm so glad you highlighted that case, because I was thinking about Oscar, the other Oscar, though now I'm thinking about the Oscar who's with me on the show. But I was thinking about him when I saw Dylan's case, because, you know, we're talking about children. In Oscar's case, he preferred to speak in English. He had been living in a Midwestern state, was hoping to go back there and continue his studies. And instead, 2 weeks after my co-author on this report interviewed him, his dad, Jacinto, was shot dead.
Wow.
And what this does is it creates a situation where, of course, a family is mourning the loss of their loved ones, but they're also in fear for their own lives. And you just have to connect it back to the Trump administration and its current policies as well, because under the Trump administration, the Attorney General has tried to limit who can get asylum in the U.S. and has specifically said that people who are fearful because their family members are targeted should no longer be able to get asylum. I mean, this is illegal under international law, and it's also inhumane when you think about a young person like Oscar, the fact that he lost his father, and that now the United States is saying we won't protect him either. And so he'll have to live in hiding because his family's under threat.
See, Will, there's a word that you use about these deportations from the US to El Salvador, just one word. Tell our audience what that one word is. How would you describe them?
I will say it's unfair, and I will say most of the guys, when they come down here, what they have is fear of the Salvadorian culture because it's known for being so violent. You know, when you are in the States and you watch documentaries such as Discovery Channel or you know those documentaries they show on TV, the first thing that comes to your mind is when I get down there, I'm either gonna get chopped up,
Yep.
or I'm gonna get killed by the authorities, or gangs are gonna get a hold of me and I'm gonna end up dead or missing. Because a lot of people be missing over here. Once you come down here and you don't know your surroundings, you have no family waiting for you.
Is that a realistic fear, though? That's a fear, but you know we can all watch TV and be scared by TV, Oscar. But is that a realistic fear?
Yes, it is a realistic fear because you're being brought to a country you don't know nothing about. Here you go. Here's your little white bag. Get out of here. We don't want to see you no more. And if we see you, you know what's going to happen. Either we're going to kill you, you're going to disappear. That's the only two things you really have for you. So the fear is there, and it's very real. I've lived it, you know, and I live it now because of my facial tattoos. That the authorities, they might just go to my house, take me out, take me somewhere, and be done. Oh, he's just another gang member there, but he don't know that I changed my life already, that I changed my life to Christ. You know, they don't see that. They can't get past the tattoos.
Right. Because Oscar, you were in prison, and so there's a difficult area here, but once you've done the time for the crime, then you feel that you should be just treated like every other citizen.
Yes, because
yeah.
I grew up in the States. You know, that at least they should give me a chance to show them that I have changed, that prisons changed me. That's what prisons is for people to
become part of this society.
So, gents,
exactly.
Let me put this to you because people are watching you on YouTube right now. So, Bogatak says, why should the West care about migrants? Why should they be concerned about what happens to people from El Salvador who move to the US and then get taken back to El Salvador for multiple reasons? Why should the West care about you?
Can I answer
About
that?
Please. Yeah, Will, you go first. Oscar, you go second.
It's a very simple question. Whether we deportees or from different nationalities, you know, you're still a human being. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't change that. The fact that you are human, you have family, you have feelings. I mean, you didn't choose to go to the States. I never chose to go to the States. I never chose to come back over here. I just grew up in a different environment, you know. And me coming back over here is the result of the bad decisions that others made for me.
Mm-hmm. Oscar, go ahead.
Yes,
people are asking you
I agree.
online, why should they have empathy for you? Go ahead.
I agree with Will because we're human. You know, we all make mistakes. At some point in time, every person in this world has made a mistake. And we regret those mistakes we made, and they should care about us because we're human. It's just a human nature to care about somebody else. You know, that's why, because we're human.
Will and Oscar, you're very popular right now. Again, here on YouTube, big conversation happening. John says, El Salvadorian people need to clean their own closet. America can't do that for them. They need to make El Salvador safe for its own people. immigration isn't the answer for their horrid living standards. Wow.
Well, I got something to say about that. I believe that the U.S. at the beginning was part of the problem, because most of our families fled this country because of the Civil War, and U.S. was involved during the Civil War. Now, this is the aftermath of the Civil War. All these people that fled this country, went into the U.S., joined gangs or whatever, now are back over here. It's a product of that. It's the result of that migration. So I believe they have some type of responsibility in this whole ordeal.
I think what's really important to talk about, Will, is the fact that you're not just sitting there waiting for someone to help you. You are helping other people. I want to show some of the things that you're doing. There's a dad and a son here who is a deportee. You're helping this particular family. And then the kind of help that you didn't get when you were deported, there's a whole shelter that you're looking after deportees because you know how tough it is when they end up back in El Salvador. So what are you doing that other people could also be doing to help this situation with people ending up in a country they really don't know?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, with a little bit of resources, what we have is a little program where we receive deportees, those that have no family, those that are running around homeless, those that have no help. We take them into a shelter. We provide a secure place, a place where they could sleep. If they have family, they could bring their family. We have a little bakery where they could generate a little bit of income, working at a decent job.
Alison, you authored this report with a co-author, and I really want to bring her into this conversation because she talks about a story that really jumped out at her. And I believe we've even just given a little bit of a teaser for that story a little bit earlier on, because she did multiple interviews in order to understand what was happening to deportees. So this is Elizabeth talking about one experience that really stayed in her mind, one interview. Have a look.
I had received a Fulbright Fellowship in 2013 and 2014 to be based from El Salvador, interviewing children and families about why they were leaving at the time. And the only interview that I ended up doing in English were a father and son who had lived in the United States for 7 years. And what came out is that they were migrating because they were being extorted, and they had been deported from Mexico and were going to try again to reach the United States. Unfortunately, a few weeks afterwards, the father was killed in broad daylight on the community's field. And it made me really angry because it's something that shouldn't happen. And that young man had to separate from his family. His mom and his siblings had to separate as well. And even today, 6 years on, they're separated and they're on the run and afraid, and they don't have their father.
Alison, you've made it very clear during our conversation that you blame the Trump administration. They should be handling this situation better. We should also say that the previous administration also deported El Salvadorians too. So it's not just about President Trump. President Obama also did something very, very similar. So what are your recommendations, having shared this report with the world, so people understand what is happening to some deportees heading from the US back into El Salvador? What should happen next? How do you fix this?
Well, it's very simple. The U.S. authorities need to take into account the extraordinary risks that Salvadorans may face if they're deported. And that opportunity must be given to everyone, regardless of their legal status, regardless of whether or not they've finished serving their sentence for a crime, regardless of whether they hold TPS, they came as a child, or they're standing at the U.S. border. Anyone who faces death or abuse in El Salvador should have a chance to explain that to U.S. authorities. And you're absolutely right. Under the Obama administration, they weren't afforded that opportunity. But I must say, the Trump administration has made things incredibly worse. The Trump administration is now forcing people to wait in dangerous Mexican border towns in order to make asylum claims. We have documented cases of Salvadorans who've been kidnapped from those towns while they're just trying to find safety in the United States, or at least have an authority hear their claim. So that needs to stop. the decisions that have tried to narrow asylum, to eliminate family-based arguments, saying, hey, my dad is targeted, I'm fearful for my life. People who are fleeing gangs, people who are fleeing because they're women or have been targeted because of their gender. All of those kinds of cases need to be heard by the United States, and that means the Attorney General has to reverse recent decisions trying to narrow those cases.
Okay, so Oscar and Will, I want to share some empathy with you also on YouTube because the conversation is going back and forth regarding deportees. Elizabeth says that she met some people from El Salvador last summer. They talked about how difficult life is there. We have resources to help, but we aren't putting our money where it should go. I'm wondering, Will, you are setting an example for programs that could help deportees. What are other authorities doing in El Salvador? Are they also helping deportees? Is it an issue for them?
Well, actually, right now, I have no knowledge of any programs that are government funded. What we have is little efforts such as the one we're running over here. Oscar already named it. The name of it is Footsteps of Hope. And it's little efforts like this, the only ones that are being involved in trying to help out people that gets deported. Because once people get deported, they become victims, they become victims of this society, victims of discrimination, stigmatization, because they have a record, a background, or just for the simple fact of being deported. So I believe that governments should try to apply new programs. They should try to invest their resources in creating good programs for people when they get over here.
Oscar, do you feel that you're a victim right now? Do you feel that you've managed to work through the dangers of being a deportee and made a new life for yourself?
Yes, of course I feel a victim over here because I can't get a job. I can't get a job because the way I look. I'm bilingual, but I can't put that to use because they just see me, they automatically think the worst. But they should take time to get to know us. Not all deportees are coming back to do bad things. The government should take time to help us. Don't just, instead of trying to lift us up, they push us down more. Deportees have a lot to offer this country, but the government won't let us. And I thank God that I found that Footsteps of Hope found me, because if not, like I said before, I don't know where I would be. I really don't. And the government should get more involved in helping us deportees.
Alison, I have to share this with you again on YouTube. Variety of opinions, but Schultzy100 says, when the gangs want your money, your income, your pay, or your family die, if you can't pay, then you have to run for your life, or everybody dies. How can we send people back to that? That is the human rights question right there. How can we send people back to that?
Exactly. And what the Trump administration has done with these recent decisions is they've tried to say that fear is not legitimate, when we know it's extremely terrifying to live under those circumstances. That's one piece of what people are fleeing. But I think it's really important to also highlight people who have lived for a long time in the United States, and obviously Will and Oscar can talk about this better than I, but they are sometimes perceived as having more resources, as being Americanized, and therefore, just like they've been talking about, they're stigmatized by their own government, but they're also targeted by criminal organizations who want to extort them, want to get those perceived resources out of their pockets. And that's a very dangerous life in El Salvador. It's not that people who aren't deported aren't also suffering from this, but deportees are at a heightened risk.
Right. Alison, we're going to leave it there. On my laptop here, you can see that new human rights report, Deported to Danger. United States deportation policies expose Salvadorians to death and abuse. Alison, thank you for joining us. Will, Oscar, thank you for sharing your experiences. We will end our conversation there. Thank you for watching. And YouTube, we appreciate your conversation as well. I will see you next time on The Stream.